Alright, this is the start of the first race, and we're watching Steve sail upwind here. Pretty good breeze. One thing we noticed right away is first how tight his outhaul is. We saw how far down his traveler was, how flat he was, and how the helm was fairly balanced. In this tack, we saw how much he eased his main out so that the boat came out of the tack nice and flat. We can see the overbend wrinkles down low like we've been talking about, showing the mast is bent enough. Okay, now we're watching Dick Moore come upwind here. We can see he's doing a nice job of steering. We can see the jib luff breaking. It means he's sailing high enough to depower the boat. Here's the overbend wrinkles we like to talk about. Traveler's down. Jib's about 2 inches inside the spreader. Maybe you can sail the boat just a little bit flatter. See the overbend wrinkles. Upper batten's just a little bit open here. Again, maybe a little bit flatter like we saw Steve there would be slick. Watch him go through a tack. Nice job easing the main out so the boat came out of the tack nice and flat. Okay, we're watching Jeff sail upwind here now. Look at this, boat's nice and flat. A little puff here, there we go, nice and flat. See a little bit of the overbend wrinkle down low that we want to see. Tiny hands these just enough that we have these wrinkles in the lower half. Upper batten might be a little bit open in relation to the boom. What we might do here is lower the traveler a little bit more and sheet the main just a little bit tighter. And what we get here is a little bit more pointing ability. Not bad though, it's not far off and he's looking very good. Again, we can see that jib in this breeze is just about 2 inches inside the spreader. It actually looks really good right now. Nice job. Okay, now we're watching Mark go upwind. He's got a whole lot of backstay on here. We can see the overbend wrinkles right in that area below the spreader, which is showing maybe a little bit too much. Boom's down real low, showing he's sheeted real hard. His traveler's low. I guess what we ought to check here perhaps is the measurement on the forestay. So look here now, he's got a whole lot of mast bend and the boom's down really low. Seems like he's moving well though at this point. Keeping the boat flat. Watch the tack here. Out to keep the boat flat. Okay, we're watching the start of the Mariner race. About 5 minutes into the race. Watching these guys sail here upwind. Actually, everything looks pretty darn good. The boat's fairly flat. We can see the kind hands eased enough that we have a little bit of wrinkle along the left. Might be able to trim the main just a little bit tighter. That might help them point just a little bit more. Seems like they're sagging down just a little bit on the boats ahead of them. And it could just be maybe they need to trim the main just to make it go up a little bit more into the wind. The boat looks good though being flat like this. And obviously we can see here a balanced helm. The upper batten's angled outboard pretty good, so maybe just a little bit more main sheet would help. Okay, we're watching Paul sail upwind here and a good breeze. There's a nice tack. We'll be sure to ease that main out so the boat stays flat. See a lot of things here looking really good. We can see the wrinkles along the luff. So the tiny hands right. You know, we've been talking a lot about backwind and how to reduce that. I guess what would be really slick here is if we get enough mast bend to get the overbend wrinkles in the lower part of the main right here. We talked a little bit about the butt of the mast and how that could help the mast bend more by shimming it a little bit underneath the back edge. I think that'd be really helpful. Here in this situation, I think maybe just a little bit more main sheet trim would help the boat point just a little bit higher. We see how the top of the main here is really open. We can actually see it bubble a little bit in front of the Mariner logo. Here we can see the upper battens angled outward from parallel. It's hard to keep the boat flat and do this, but it might allow us to trim it in, go a little bit higher, feather it up a little bit more. Well, look at the difference here. Look at Paul. Look at that top batten parallel to the boom. There's the wrinkles. You definitely get the sensation he's going just a little bit higher. Definitely. So, what we learned here is upper batten parallel to the boom. Don't be afraid to feather up in the breeze. Let the left of the jib break. A little bit of wrinkle along the left. And maybe it'd be worth messing around a little bit with the butt of the mast to help the mast bend more. Okay, we're following Glenn here, and first thing we notice is that they're pretty darn flat in this breeze. Second thing we notice is that there's a little bit of helm, but a lot of times, look when he flattens out here, look how that tiller goes straight down the center line. You can see a little bit of the overbend wrinkles down low, right in there. We see the Cunningham's ease, so the wrinkles go up to the spreader window. We see the upper batten is just about parallel to the boom. The traveler's down. He's doing a real nice job. The other thing here that he's doing that's pretty slick is he's not moving the tiller much. You know, a lot of times you can watch sailors that are wiggling the tiller back and forth. That's usually a good sign that the boat has helm in it, and obviously wiggling the tiller back and forth drags the rudder through the water and slows the boat down. So try to keep the helm settled down and the boat balanced. Ooh, tacking right on top of Steve here. Steve looks good as well. Nice tack. Look how much he's eased the main out, and only now does he pull it back in. You see how the boat was flat through the tack and flat when it came out. Again, look how little Steve's moving the tiller. Look how the boat's balanced. Look how flat it is. There's the overbend wrinkles. Nicely done. Now he has his main trimmed in pretty tight right here. We can see that upper batten is at least parallel to boom. That's going to give him more pointing ability and make it just a little bit harder to keep the boat in the groove and tracking well. Looks like he's doing a nice job there. Here with Steve though, look how tight the jib is. He's well inside the tip of the spreader, maybe 5 inches, 6 inches perhaps. We can see the bottom of the jib is hooking back into the main, and the slide is going to be obviously pretty closed here. And with the jib trimmed in this tight, this too is going to make the boat fairly critical to steer. Steve's doing a nice job, but it might just be a little bit more forgiving and a little bit quicker to track with it eased just a little bit. It's tough to tell from this angle, but there's actually pretty big wrinkles along the left of the jib. In this kind of condition, we want just small, subtle wrinkles, you know, maybe a couple inches back from the left, to know we got it set right.
Just says they want to be pulled out.
Okay. Nice tack there. Again, notice how Steve's eased the main out. Get it going. That's in this kind of breeze, Jack pointed out, you just nearly pull the wrinkles all the way out. When it's blowing hard like this and you're a little bit overpowered. Yeah, it's really unusual in this kind of breeze to have backwind, but from this angle we can see it here on Steve's main, and it's trimmed well. The back stays right, Cunningham's right, but that's purely because the jib's in a little bit too tight. You see it right from here. Okay, we're watching Andy go upwind here, and right now in this trim, the main's actually pretty full. He might have one more block behind the main, or the mast at the deck to get a little more bend down low. We don't see many overbend wrinkles down low, and the middle of the main looks pretty deep right at the spreader. So again, put a block behind it, get those overbend wrinkles in there, maybe a little bit more backstay. Outhaul looks good though, we can see how tight that is. And the trim looks pretty good. He's pretty close to parallel to the boom. And he's doing a nice job of keeping it flat. When we look at the jib down here, get a little lift at the same time. trim looks pretty good. That's as tight as you'd want it, I think, in this kind of breeze. It's about 3 inches in for that CP2. Again, the tighter it is, the more critical it is to keep the boat going. Now in this lull, maybe the traveler could come up, get a little bit more height, keep the boat in balance.
Yeah.
Nice tack again. You can see the boat's pretty flat. This would be a neat time to bring that traveler up.
You better watch it.
Okay, we're going to watch Mark go through a jibe here. Okay, from this angle we can see the two ends are just about even. We see the curl on the left of the spinnaker that we'd like to see. Might be able to let the halyard off 6 or 8 inches to help open up the slot between the main and the jib up top. And it looks like, from this angle, perhaps the vang is a little bit loose. Remember, we want that top batten to be parallel to the boom. And in this condition, when the batten's right and the main's trimmed right, that telltale flows straight off the leech up top. One thing that Mark's doing real well here is letting the boat heel to weather every once in a while. Keeping the boat heeled to help keep that helm neutral. Here we can see a good shot of the vang being fairly eased. See a lot of twist up top. And all we're doing here is fill in some power. And again, that vang should come on so that top end is just about parallel to the boom. This is a great angle to show it. There we can see a big difference there. Let's watch Brant take this mark round in here. Remember, we want to take it wide on this side, tight on the other. Okay, and maybe one thing that can help in this situation is to keep that jib eased so that the main would be the only thing steering the boat up onto its course. Like right here too. Keep that jib eased until it's on its close hauled course. We want to cut it real wide on this side and tight on the other. Okay, we're watching Dick sail upwind here. Nicely done. Look at the traveler down. There's the overbend wrinkles. Upper batten parallel to the boom. Maybe just a little bit flatter if you can there. Outhaul's nice and tight, that shelf is closed. Look at the jib, just about at the end of the spreader, maybe in 1.5 inches in this kind of stuff. It actually looks really good. You can see those overbend wrinkles down low we've been talking about. Could maybe use a little bit of Cunningham in this breeze now since it's blowing even harder to pull those wrinkles down just below the spreader window. Remember, try not to wiggle the tiller too much. Try to keep it settled down and the boat kind of tracking straight and smooth. That looks nice. Remember to ease the main sheet out, keep the boat flat when it comes out of the tack. That was good. There we go. You can hear it come right back in. That looks good. Jib's eased until the boat's up to speed. Maybe a little bit slower in the first part of the tack, and maybe to be picky here, maybe Dick could have stayed on the old weather side just a little bit longer to give it just a little bit of roll. Don't need a whole lot of roll in this kind of breeze, but it helps the boat go through the eye of the wind just a little bit smoother. Okay, let's look at Paul again here. He's looking real good. Notice how the boat's fairly balanced. Very little helm. He's not wiggling the tiller a whole lot. Keeping the boat fairly steady. Nice tack. Nice slow tack in the beginning. Okay, look at the wrinkles along the left here. It wouldn't take much more mass bend to turn these wrinkles into overbend wrinkles. Just a little bit, I bet a shimmin underneath that butt would do it just fine. Look at how he keeping the boat balanced. Trimming the main fairly hard so that top batten is parallel to the boom at least, but that's important to bend the mast. And notice here how that telltale is stalling a good bit of the time. That's telling us that he's got it trimmed in tight enough. There he just trimmed it in a little bit tighter. Doing a nice job. And remember, the key thing is here the balance. As we watch him, the helm is nearly neutral. Look at that, straight down the center line right there. If we look at his telltales, we see the weather telltale is stalled a good bit of the time in this breeze. We can see the slot is nice and symmetrical all the way up. If there was a batten in the middle of the leech, that would be parallel to center line. It's looking real good right here. Very little movement in the tiller. Very little helm. Jib has a nice shape to it. Now haul fairly tight to keep the bottom of the main nice and flat. Slight crease from the tack to the clew. And this is interesting. We're watching Terry's sail upwind right here. Let's see this tack. Not bad, nice and smooth. Nice slow tack. Okay, we see a very different setup here. Back stays really tight, and the main is well eased. Now, the advantage of what Paul was doing is it gives him more gears. When he trims the main in tight like that, he can straighten out the jib luff and make the jib flatter, bend the mast. And when he eases the main sheet out, the mast straightens up and the jib gets fuller. Right here we see the sheet is really eased out, the top is really open. And I think what Terry might have here is a little bit lack of pointing. And it'd be interesting to see if that's a problem, but a lack of pointing because the top of the main is really open. We can see that telltale is flying most of the time, which on Paul's we saw is stalled.
Keep going.
What we might suggest here is that Terry just trim it in a little bit tighter and let it feather up a little bit higher into the wind. The other thing we see here, though, too, is lower shrouds are quite a bit tighter. Look at that. We don't see near the slop in the rig, especially the lower shroud that we saw in Paul's. Jib looks nice, though. You see a big difference in tuning and setup here. This is interesting. Okay, we got 30 seconds to start here in the second lightning race. You can see he's going to the leeward end. It's going to be a little bit tricky here. Got 10 seconds. Looking good here. There's the gun. Yeah, excellent start for the whole gang here. You can see the overbend wrinkles on Steve there. And he's bearing off to clear his air, which is probably a good move if he really doesn't want to tack. His trim looks good. Glenn's looking good. His jib's just about 2 inches in off the end of the spreader. Outhaul nice and tight. He's looking to tack. He's trying to get his air clear. Doesn't like where he is right now in this bad air. Mark's looking good. Nice tack here, but there we go. Ease the sheet out. Maybe ease the sheet out just a little bit more as soon as the sail fills on the new tack to keep the boat flat, but that was good. Ease it out and back up to speed. We can see the overbend wrinkles there. Iron hand's nice and eased. Here, Glenn might be able to trim the jib in just a little bit. We can see a lot of twists right here, right now. Same with the main. Maybe can trim the main in just a little bit tighter. Maybe let the traveler down just a little bit more. See, both sails here are twisted a lot. This would be the kind of trim you'd want for sailing on a lot of chop. And actually, as we watch here, the comparison between he and Mark, we almost get the sensation Mark's got a little bit of height, a little bit of pointing ability here on Glenn. And I think, again, the whole reason is just this twist in the sails. Just trim a little bit harder, especially in this flat water. Yeah, look at the difference here. Jeff's outhaul is really loose. Oh, this is a perfect shot showing what we're talking about here. You can see how full the main is in this lower section. You can actually see a little bit of backwind. So here, we just need to pull that outhaul. That's it. We're laying, that's it. Oh man, look at that. Look how much better it looks with it tighter. The shelf is closed now, and the main's quite a bit flatter. That's good. Okay, now Jeff could ease the traveler out a little bit. Trim his main harder. See how twisted open it is. But what he's compromising here again is pointing ability. But what he's doing really well right now is sailing boat flat, and look how balanced that helm is. You can see when it heels, he gets a little bit of helm. And when he goes flat, there it is, straight down the center line. See, the jib is trimmed just about right, maybe 2 inches in off the end of the spreader. Maybe a little bit more outhaul would be good. Remember, we want that seam in this kind of breeze right along the side of the boom. Better though, we can see this part of the main is quite a bit flatter than it was. Now we're watching the Dick Sailfin. Ooh, nice job on the outhaul, nice and tight. Maybe a little bit more cunning hand to pull these wrinkles down to the lower quarter, maybe a little bit low of the spreader window here. Traveler looks good. Main is trimmed to the upper batten parallel of the boom. Maybe sail just a little bit flatter. Not bad. Easing the main out. That was good. Still ease. That's good. Keep the boat on its feet. And there it came back in. That was good.
Up underneath of it?
Yeah. No, to leeward, like right off this boom kind of deal. Okay, we got a nice line up here as we go towards the jibe mark. We're going to take a look at Glenn and his trim. First thing we can see from here is the curl on the luff, which is cool. That's what we're looking for. We want that sheet to be eased, so we always have a little bit of curl on the luff. We talked about here on with Mark, getting enough bang on to keep that upper batten parallel, and we can see how twisted the main is here. And again, a little bit of bang would take that out. Look at the difference here with Glenn. His bang is set so that the top batten is just about parallel to the boom. That looks good. We can see the two ends are just about parallel here on the shoe too. And there's the curl. Nice job. Halyards off the top of the mast a little bit. Nice and flat. I'm sure the helm's balanced here, and a good guide, of course, is to pull the board up until the helm is balanced. Looks really good. That's just perfect trim there. Same here with Andy. Here we might have just a little bit too much bang on. You can see that upper batten is almost hooked a little bit in relation to the boom. A quick shot at Terry here. We had talked about his lower shrouds being a little bit too tight. Maybe we get a shot at him when he comes back. It looks like his main is a little bit deeper down low. So when the lower shrouds are too tight here, it makes the main fuller in the lower sections, right in there. So you want those lower shrouds loose enough that the mast can bend forward at the spreader. Okay, we're going to watch Steve Sailfin here, and you can tell when a boat's tracking real well, when it's trimmed out well, that it goes through the water very smoothly. You can see here, Steve's got it in the groove nicely. Look how he's steering with the luff of the jib actually breaking at times. The weather telltales are in a little bit of a stall. There we go. See that? The puff there, the jib luff is actually breaking a bit. A little bit of wrinkle off of each snap. And this puff, he might be able to trim it just a little bit tighter. That is, pull the jib cloth a little bit tighter to minimize those wrinkles. But you can see how that weather tick is stalled much of the time. There's the wrinkles along the left. You can see the overbend wrinkles beginning. Downhaul is nice and tight. We look carefully to see Steve playing that main a good bit. One thing you might do here, if we look carefully, is see that his bridle is high enough he's actually tube locked at the back. Right now that's working fine, but if he wanted to point a little bit higher, he wanted to stuff it up into the wind in a flat spot, he couldn't trim it in any tighter. So I guess I'm suggesting maybe lower that bridle a little bit so he just has a little bit more range to trim the main in. But that's being picky, and he actually looks really good right here. We've talked about the upper batten being parallel to boom and the top telltale stalled, 50% of the time. There it's flying, there it's stalled, there it's flying, there it's stalled. So that gives you a good idea that it really, when it's trimmed right, that telltale is rarely flying all the time. Doing a nice job of keeping the boat flat here. The weather chine, maybe flatten out a little bit in this puff. Weather chine should be just about 3 or 4 inches off the water, more like we see there. Jib doesn't need to come in any tighter, but it looks okay here. That's maybe 4 inches inside the spreader. Maybe in that puff, crack the main just a little bit to keep her tracking. See just a little bit of helm there. Maybe the traveler should go down just a bit. There we go. Look when he goes flat, how that tiller goes right down the center line, right there, okay? Outhaul's nice and tight. Look at that. Just like the book says. Nice tack. Smooth, slow in the beginning. Look how the main's eased. And then just trimmed in after he got back on the new tack. So the boat came out of the tack nice and flat. Okay, we're watching Paul sail along here now in this breeze. He's got a nice lead, he's looking real good. He's going to do a tack here. Okay, we're watching Sam sail along here right now, and we see a little bit of backwind in his main in this area. I think a little bit of this comes... It's happening because the mast isn't bending quite enough. You can see he's trimming hard like we saw Paul was doing, but I think a little bit of what's going on here is maybe his lower shrouds are a little bit too tight. Again, a little bit looser lower will let this part of the mast bend a little more, and the mast will flatten out. So the mast will bend and the sail will flatten out. He's doing a nice job of steering the boat balanced. You can see he's not wiggling the tiller much. You can see how the weather telltales on the jib are showing that he's pointing into the upper end of his groove. He's trimming the main hard enough here to help bend the mast and flatten the sail. You can see that telltale is stalled, like we talked about, 50% of the time anyway. Outhaul's got the crease. Shows that that's pulled in tight enough. Jib looks good. There was a batten in the middle of the leech, be parallel to the center line of the boat. Nice, smooth, slow tack. Maybe crack that main sheet out a little bit to help balance the helm and let the boat get moving before it comes out. There we go. Now it's starting to go. Look at the helm right there. You see the rudder dragging through the water. So all we really need to do here is perhaps ease that main out when we come out of the tack. Halyard tension looks good. A little bit of wrinkle along the left. Looks good. Here's our driving team. Jack and John.
Waiting for the pier.
Yes. A friendly race committee boat. And the end of the day.
Shot Club, and we're looking at the starting line, the Sunday afternoon race, and we have a slow sea breeze just now filling in steadily. Don't have a compass heading on that, but hopefully you've come out early enough so that you've done some starboard and tack compass readings, and so you have an idea of how the wind is filling in, whether it's coming in harder on the right side of the course or the left side of the course, and what those numbers are. That way when you cross the starting line here, you can look at your compass and have some kind of idea of what your starboard tack looks like, whether it's a slight lift or if it's already a header. If you think it's going to continually go right for another 15 or 50 degrees, then you definitely want to think of that in your windward mark or your windward leg plans. Your start may your position on the starting line would take into consideration what your windward leg plans are. If you think it's going to continue to go right, then you want to definitely go right, or at least protect right, stay between the right hand side of the course and your fleet. In other words, sail towards the header. Hopefully before the start here you've also come out here and you've paired off with the buddy and just gone upwind and tweaked your boat and figured out how to get as much boat speed as possible. This start is basically the drag race portion of the race. Boat speed really pays off at the start, and of course at the leeward mark grounding where you're trying to get clear air. Maybe you've grounded right next to somebody and you need clear air. So if you don't have any idea of comparison boat speed, then you won't know until the starting line whether you're up to speed or not. And then it's basically too late, because at the start you need your head out of the boat, or at least your crew, looking up the course, choosing the puffs, staying away from the shiny water, all those neat plans. There's the weather mark straight up there. Right now the wind is kind of coming across the port side of the course. Hopefully the race committee is anticipating a right-hand shift. So you come out and you've gotten some starboard and port readings. As you can see from this lighting, the port tack is heavily favored. It's questionable whether starboard tack can lay the line. So you have your starboard and port tack compass headings. You have paced against some other boats to know that your boat speed is right on. And now you're developing a plan for the windward leg, with according to what you've already seen out here and what you've seen in the past. Or if you're new like me, you've talked to a couple of locals and they've anticipated a starboard shift as the sea breeze fills in. All of that with an open mind and being ready for anything, right? You probably also want to know who your competition is and who the favorite to win this race would be. With that in mind, I always ask my crew to tell me where they are at all times, because I'll factor that in with my own judgment calls. And the more confidence I have in an area, maybe the more independent and riskier I would make my own decisions. But you know, there's no reason not to use the judgment of other good sailors in creating your own plan. Now, I've got a whistle in the background and I guess a whistle on the committee boat, so I never heard the starting signal. But you can see port tack at the pen was heavily favored. Alright, not knowing what the course is, not being a competitor, not having gone by the committee boat, we're doomed to follow. And it appears that the rest of the fleet is in a parade right now to this mark straight ahead. No one seems to be tacking, clearing their air, so I'm assuming it's just going to be a triangle with port roundings. Sorry about that. I'm looking through my other eye trying to figure out where the fleet is as I'm zoomed in on these guys. If this is truly a parade, and okay, there's a boat heading down right there, so this guy here should anticipate a major header. If that's true, you definitely don't care about pointing, you care about boat speed, trying to get across your competition here. You want, the rule of thumb is to stay between your competition and the next windward mark, the competition and the next shift. Here's a boat tacking to hopefully to clear his air. And if you anticipate more shifts, this is going to be a costly tack. If you consider that the wind is going to go right more and more, then you want to keep sailing to the right, you know, because basically this left hand or this port tack is a major lift. The longer you stay on this port tack, the more it's considered a lift because you're sailing into a header. At some point, you've got to, break free and say, okay, this is the best starboard I'm going to get, and go for your mark. But I would imagine these guys are going to keep going until their numbers agree to, the sea breeze that's filled in. In other words, keep going to the right until you almost have to start tacking on starboard to get to the mark. You can see now with this shift that they're not laying the weather mark, and it's become more of a beat. So these guys have to decide how much more is it going to shift to the right before they tack. If it shifts if it continues shifting to the right after they tack, then they've missed a shift. They're also looking at these wind lanes, trying to stay in the best breeze. Okay, this was the first person to tack, and now we're beginning to see several people tacking, and he has a great puff right here. I assume that's why we're tacking here, to stay out of that shiny water straight ahead, and looking for more ripples over here. There's a little wind lane. So we're just following the breeze, trying to stay in the best velocity and hopefully the best boat speed. In this light air, you can see that there's considerable twists in all the sails for acceleration. As you pick up speed, or as you find the wind, as it shifts, you are forced into kind of a wide margin of error. So until things settle down, you want your sheets out so you can accelerate, find the groove. And once you get locked into the groove and everything seems to steady down and you continue to stay in the groove, then you can begin easing your sheets in tighter and tighter, thus forcing yourself into a very narrow margin of error. Don't let your over-anxious crew bring in your sheets tighter than you can steer to. The tighter the sails, the narrower your margin of error. And depending on how lumpy the water is, or how shifty the breeze is, or how new you are to steering a lightning, you would need bigger and bigger margin of error to steer to. And until you can actually get good enough to feel the groove when things get really fast, maybe you want things eased out. Right now the skipper's concentrating on watching those telltales and driving the boat as fast as possible. He's working together with the middleman, hopefully, or the jib man, if that's the foredeck, to coordinate the main and the jib so that they complement each other in trim. You can see here we have kind of a complementary twist in both sails. The jib twists and the main twists. And hopefully when you came out, you basically set your jib up so that the top pair of telltales follow the same as the bottom telltales. So skippers, with your crew's help, you're trying to drive the boat as fast as possible, and if you have someone on the boat with enough experience, they can be painting a visual picture of what's going on the course, a mental picture for you, so that you can concentrate on your sail trim and on getting those telltales flowing. In this light air, I would anticipate both telltales are flowing evenly. Probably the top telltales and the bottom telltales are going to flow about the same. Here's a picture of a tack. You can see that the crew went to the low side. Let's see where to begin. Basically, when you tack, you want to pick out a visual sight on the shore to kind of give you an idea of how far to come through the tack. Your crew are going to ease the sheets a little bit, probably to give you a wide margin of error to come out of the tack and find the groove again. As that becomes more and more consistent, your crew can begin using their weight to help you turn the boat. Remember, your rudder is the brake. Just like an Optimus with that great big rudder, you can use it as a brake, or you can use it to, as a foil. It's actually another sail. It's just in the water, and that sail called a rudder and a centerboard can either help you or it can be stalled, just like your sails can be stalled. Every time you move that rudder, you're stalling that rudder, but you're willing to do that just to turn the boat. So if you can turn the boat using your weight or using your sails a little bit, that may keep you from slowing down as much as your brake. I've renamed the rudder the brake because that's really what it does. Okay, first boat to the mark. Hopefully before they've gotten to this mark they've had a plan. Their plan includes setting the spinnaker, and that was a wonderful hoist right at the mark. They definitely were not surprised with that mark rounding. They've planned ahead, had the spinnaker pull up, had the spinnaker on the deck so that it's ready to be free of the deck and hoisted. Yeah. Okay, second mark rounding. You can see how critical it is to get that guy around early so that it doesn't twist. Third boat around. You can see as you look ahead, the boats ahead are having a difficult time setting their spinnakers. It's a very close reach, so you can anticipate that with your crew. That means the spinnaker pole doesn't need to come back very far, maybe just to the head stay, and it's going to require a really tight spinnaker sheet to fill. Skippers, you can anticipate fighting for clear air as you round because it's going to be a straight shot to the next mark, if not above your course. So you don't want to get caught like this blue boat in bad air. It's very difficult to pass another boat on a tight reach, so it doesn't help usually to go low. Unless you can go low and get clear air. You can see these boats filling. They're getting more and more air. And our mark straight ahead. Okay, with this triangle in mind, thinking ahead, if this is a really tight reach, you know that the next reach is going to be very full. In fact, it may be so full that it may actually be a run. And if it's a run, then you might be able to jibe. So you can anticipate getting to this mark and squaring off and not necessarily jibing right away, depending on which side of the run has more wind. Many times people get to a jibe mark and they just automatically go into a jibe because that's what they've always done. And if you don't jibe, if you continue just sailing on starboard but pulling the pole back and heading downwind, many times you can make a planned jibe later on and not such a sharp, slow jibe at the jibe mark. Okay, our first boat's around and he's elected to jibe at the mark, and you can see the other boats coming. Now based on his decision, these other guys can either agree with that or disagree. They can look at his setting and decide whether, okay, well actually he didn't jibe now that I look through the viewfinder, or through my other eye, out of the viewfinder. So that's probably a tactical call. If you jibe right away, that means you're kind of blanketed by these guys that are close behind you. Okay, just looking at the spinnaker pole height and the set of the spinnaker, you can see the spinnaker halyard is eased a little bit. I assume that's to get it away from the mast and kind of square it up on the boat. You can see this boat here. Oops, here we go. Got to use my left eye better than my right. Spinnaker pole is low, is a little bit higher than the horizon. You can see now the spinnaker is kind of suffocating with air. It probably needs to pull a little bit further back. It's kind of hanging. It's, you know, like it's losing air. It's not really curling. It's just sagging due to lack of air. That's a sign of not enough spinnaker pull back. You want it to curl down low, not up high. Okay, this is kind of confusing tactically. Here's our mark straight ahead. I imagine it's that tetrahedron. I thought they were laying it fairly well on port tack. Jibing on the starboard here would just bring you into the traffic and into the wind shadow of the fleet. And I assume it's maybe these, I'm just second guessing this, maybe they're going to the finish line. Can't really tell. tactically you'd probably want to, you know, if this were a rounding and not a finish, you'd want to kind of stay to the left and jibe in on starboard at the mark, just to keep clear air. In any case, you can see now, looking down these booms, that if the boom and the spinnaker pole were a plane, one continual line, the pole should come aft. And I like to think of the pole as coming even further aft than the boom. On a lightning, the boom can't go as far out as you would like it to, because it touches the shrouds, because the lower shrouds are a little aft. So for that reason, you always want your spinnaker pole on a run further aft than the boom. Now that's, you know, I never say always, because really the best telltale on the boat is your spinnaker, and you want that spinnaker to curl about in the colored stripe, about the middle of the leech. The spinnaker needs to be pulled aft because it's just sagging due to lack of air. You could lower the pole a little bit to match the other clue, and keep pulling that pole aft until it forces a curl down low in the spinnaker, or down in the middle of the, see, that's curling up top. And when you have it curling up top, you know, you got a nice balloon shape in your spinnaker, but I think you're hiding quite a bit of behind the main as a result. You can see a little bit, this spinnaker has a little bit more exposed because his pole is a little further aft. Okay, tactically, since we're on a run, these guys in the back want to slow the leaders down. How can you do that? You know, the only thing that the leader really requires is wind. So how could you slow the leaders down when you're up, you know, when you're upwind of them? Tactically, you want to jibe over and position your boat so that the arrow on the top of his mast is pointing right at you. That means that his apparent wind is straight back where your boat is, and that'll shut off quite a bit of breeze to his spinnaker, and that'll slow him down. And you'll actually find them jibing around trying to keep you off of that breeze. Alright, you can see that on the douses here, they're plenty early so that they can get the spinnaker away and start their turn. Now imagine you can see both boats using their rudder to make that turn, which is you know, which is typical. What other things could you use besides your brake to help the boat turn? Every time you use the brake, of course, you're compromising boat speed for turning motion. If you said if you said wait, you'd be correct. Your crew can go to the low side, and that'll make the boat turn left. If you also said don't trim your jib flat, but kind of leave it loose as you make the rounding, that would also be correct, because you remember your jib will make the boat turn away from the wind. So as you turn left, let's watch these guys. As you turn left, you want to trim your main end. That makes the boat want to turn left even more. If you leave your jib with a little bit of luff in it, that'll make the boat, you know, want to turn left also. If you trim your jib really hard, anticipating the round. Okay. We got in the way of this guy. He was tacking at the mark just to clear his air. Nice ease on the sheets. You can see that the main is eased until he gets up to speed. As he feels the boat accelerating and getting up to speed, he can trim. Okay, 2 quick tacks, that's real costly, but I imagine he didn't anticipate this eelgrass stuff, and so he's forced into another tack. Oops. Crew on the low side to initiate boat speed. Okay, the leader's loving this. These 3 boats are definitely playing with each other and playing with each other's breeze, and the leader is just stretching the lead. So evidently these 3 guys have decided that the leader is going to win, and they're fighting for second place. See the distance between the main and the jib. It's called a slot, and that's a pretty big slot. You know, once you're up to boat speed, you want to try trimming your jib leech a little bit tighter, pulling your jib sheet tighter and tighter. There's kind of an agreed position somewhere on the spreader, from the spreader tip, as much as inside 5 inches or so, depending on the conditions and what your guru sailmaker says. But you can kind of, using other boats as a marker, you can kind of decide where the best spot for the conditions, the daily conditions are, and the best spot for your sailing ability. Okay, here comes our second windward mark rounding. I would anticipate this is going to be a windward leeward. Once again, the spinnaker's prepped and ready for the hoist right as they near the mark. They brought the guy back just as quickly as possible, and that's filled the spinnaker. This team has practiced a lot, and they've probably sailed together quite a bit, and that's a big advantage, as you can see. Their spinnaker pole is brought back pretty far so that the top of the so that the white part of the spinnaker is curling. By over rotating it like that, that gets as much of it as possible away from the main. Sometimes on a dead run, you'll have it so far back that the sheet gets close to the headstay, and of course with our experience with the triangle, we know that this is not going to be a complete run. It's not a dead run, remember, because we had a dead run on our second reach. So this is going to be a heavily starboard favored. You would anticipate heading straight for the mark. I say straight for the mark. You always want to sail up on the lulls and down in the puffs. That's why it should be facing aft right here. Your skipper and middleman are keeping the boat going as fast as possible. The foredeck's already gotten the spinnaker up, so they should be holding the boom out near the shroud and then looking aft. There's nothing happening up ahead. The race is happening right back here. That's your competitors, that's where the wind is coming from, and that's where you're going to make the judgment on when you should jibe, when you should head up. Okay, the other 3 boats, the competition's around the mark, and the red boat needs to keep an eye on behind him because he doesn't want the blue boat to cross his arrow. In other words, they don't want this blue spinnaker to take their wind. So they're watching the telltales. Maybe skippers put or crew members, you're the ones looking back there, you put a telltale on that backstay so you can actually see where the wind is coming from. You don't have to use your arrow because they're a little more gravity dependent. So if you put a telltale on the backstay, you can keep an eye on your competition, and you can advise your skipper that this blue boat's starting to get close to our wind. And with that in mind, he can change his course or even call for a jibe. You can tell the skipper that no more obvious puff is coming. You can actually even say, hey, if there is a puff, it's over here, which may encourage the skipper to actually jibe over to stay between the puff and the next mark, or maybe just to be the first boat to engage that next puff. Many times puffs don't come to you. Back downwind, if you just wait for the puff, then they never get there. So by jibing over, you may actually, intersect the puff on the other side of the course. Okay, let's watch. Oh, that's a real sign of suffocation there, and the only way to keep it from suffocating is to pull that guy further and further back. In fact, that's basically almost a jibe. There's almost by the lee. They may have had a wind shift or lull or something. There we go. Now they're recognizing that, looking at the telltales and calling for a jibe. Okay, coming right out of a jibe, you can see this blue boat closing quickly, so this yellow boat needs to heat it up, sail a little bit higher initially to get up the boat speed. Otherwise, you're basically forcing this blue boat to jibe inside you. You really want to keep him to the right of you. I mean, if you like your port tack jibe, you don't want your competition jibing inside of you. So coming up for boat speed. Let's see what we've got here. I wasn't watching the yellow to really diagnose what's going on. Spinnaker pole's definitely too high. You want it basically parallel to the horizon, and then once you get your spinnaker flying, you basically want it even with the other clue. And And on dead run, I like to actually lower it, make it lower than the other clue. Definite suffocation. The yellow spinnaker needs some air, so either pull the guy back. There it is. Just pull the guy back, get some air in that spinnaker. It's a big telltale, so you want to keep that leading edge, or that left-hand edge, curling, or close to a curl. That's a long way from a curl, so keep easing that sheet out. Keep bringing the guy back as far as you can. Okay, so there's our leeward. Now we got another windward. So these boats are setting up for a douse. Now thinking ahead, which tack was favored, starboard downwind or port downwind? Now, you know you're going to be ranning the weather mark on starboard tack. If the port jibe is heavily favored downwind, you may want to actually bring your spinnaker in on the other side, on the starboard side, so that you can do a jibe set. It's a little bit harder on your crew, and it definitely slows the boat down. Alright, I'm a little late on catching the tack, but you can see they came out with a lot of heel, and they're bringing it down, keeping the weather rail fairly close to the water. You can see this is a shot of the headstay sag, and that gives you a little bit more horsepower in light air. According to your tuning guide, you already know what your headstay length should be. That's what it looks like, and that's why you have all of that loose headstay. Okay, same boat from the stern. Now, basically, it's not real windy, so you've not had to depower. If anything, you're still trying to look for power. So that's why you have full sails. Okay, here's a good tack. Coming out of the tack, they have their sails eased, and as they've built speed, they're bringing in the sails tighter and tighter, narrowing their margin of error to steer and bringing it closer to the wind and very narrow groove. Now the water's real flat, and the wind is real steady, so you can get a fairly narrow margin of error as you're working upwind. You can begin noticing some consistencies. You can see his tiller is straight with the mast, so that means he doesn't have excessive calm, either windward or leeward. That's good, so that means your rudder's not working as a brake. As you duck, you might want to ease your sails just to keep them from stalling. You might begin noticing, consistencies like your top batten telltale is stalled, 50% of the time, or 100% of the time, or not at all, depending on what it does that day and in the conditions. Your crew is studying the other sail shapes and sail trims and watching the other boats to see if they have any kind of boat speed on you. They're painting a middle picture of where the boats are, saying so-and-so's on starboard, so-and-so's on port, and that gives a mental picture to the skipper of what his competition is doing. As the skipper is trying to keep up mentally as he's driving and playing a little mental chess game, every once in a while looking up, verifying what he's seen in his mind through the descriptions. And basically taking snapshots. That's why you want your crew watching all the time, describing, because they're basically doing a video analysis of the wind and the tactics. The skipper can't afford to look that heavily, so he's taking just little snapshots, snippets of what he's been describing, or what the crew's been describing. This is a good example of having your crew on the low side, so you skippers can sit on the high side with, you know, in whatever normal position you're used to. You know, if you like hiking, then you can sail the best in this hiking position. But that's excessive heel, so that crew needs to stay on their haunches and move a little quicker. They need to anticipate those puffs. Even though they're on the low side, they're watching the wind, watching up to windward, calling those puffs to the skipper. Puff in 30 seconds. 3, 2, 1 now. And as you know, as they anticipate that, they're moving up, keeping the boat just perfectly heeled. Whatever you've decided is perfect. You know, 10 degrees, 20 degrees, whatever is needed for the conditions. They're also watching the helm of the skipper, trying to help him remember that he wants a neutral or just a slight windward helm. Excessive heel induces more windward helm, so you've got to get rid of it some other way with your rig. Alright, we're nearing our port tack lay line. If you're looking up here, you can see this guy is above his lay line, so I would anticipate this guy tacking pretty soon. He might be hesitating just for this puff that's coming in. Oh no, we've got a finish line up here. Aren't you glad I'm not your tactician? So these guys are working towards the finish here. So he's basically straight downwind to the finish. And he's heading for some shiny water, so he's probably not going to go that far. Just caught a nice little puff here. Good shot at the twist, which gives him a big margin of error to steer by. Having a nice twist like this, is really good because it gives you a little bit of a room for mistakes, and that's not your mistakes. It can be mistakes in the breeze, it can be lulls, waves, power boats, just a lot of different things that might slow you down or make it difficult to stay in the groove. If you do have a little puff, then you can click in the sails a little bit tighter, because with each mile-an-hour puff, your leeches are going to stretch a little bit more and more. So you compensate by bringing your sheets in a little bit tighter. He's going to anticipate a little header because the boat ahead of him is a little bit headed. So he wants to go for speed here, not point. And this guy doesn't see a header. Either that or he's pinching quite a bit for the finish. Don't be duped by trying to make a mark. Always go for speed, and if you have to tack, you have to tack. Sure enough. Tactically, you want to, stay on the lifted tack, of course, but when you get to the finish line, you want to consider the other boats. And tacking over on starboard just to barely make that orange ball is correct. Maybe you want to tack so that you don't actually make the ball, and right as you get a boat length from the ball, you shoot straight into the wind, and you save yourself a boat length on port tack. By sailing just shy of it on starboard, you shoot straight into the wind and finish head to wind. That's a real effective way of nudging out some competitor that stayed on port like this a little bit too long. Okay, looks like he's tacked more or less for the middle of the line, and with no one close by, it's a nice easy finish. As you're sailing downwind, it's a good time to talk with your competition, congratulating them. And with the congratulations, just saying, hey, what'd you find over on the other side of the course? Good time to engage in conversation and figure out what's going on. Winners like to tell how they did it, so it's a good time to listen. I really feel like the best sailors are also the best listeners. They ask a lot of questions and do less talking because they can find out a lot more that way. Not that they're slow to share information when people ask, they want to share that, because the faster they can make their competition, ultimately the faster they'll go, because they'll keep each other fast.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I'm gonna no fair. I get to ask questions here.
Cool.
Well, you all ended up first, right?
Yep.
Looking at this, all we can see with the green sail numbers, what kind of things would you attribute your success?
Getting a good start.
Good start. Which end of the line were you?
balloon end.
Okay, right at the pin on port. Okay.
Right on the port of the gun.
That gave you all kind of options, right? When did you decide to tack over on starboard?
First time, when we first went into a knock and it looked like there was a dead spot to the right.
Uh-huh.
Competition was going back to the left, so get back in front of them and
Okay.
stay out of the bad air on the right.
Okay, so you really waited as long as you could to tack.
There's no reason to tack.
What do you mean by that? Why did you want to stay on port as long as possible?
If the wind is going to do anything, it's going to go to the right.
Okay.
At least down here it usually does. It didn't quite do that, so we saw it didn't look like it. The left looked a lot better, we went back to the left.
Okay. So you wanted to stay to the right as much as possible because that's where you thought it would shift. How long has your crew been with you?
We've been sailing together for 19 years. The same crew.
Okay. Well,
My wife Beth.
hi Beth.
Real men sail with their wives. It's a lot easier when you want to buy sails too.
Yeah, I think the crew work was real evident. You know, watching the spinnaker sets and douses. I even made a comment on the video that it's. I would anticipate this team's been together for a long time, communicating real well.
Bernie, treat you all right?
What do you think the wind's going to do on the second race?
Doesn't look like it's going to do much. Seriously. It should have done something a long time ago. It might just be a little light and fluky like this for a second.
Okay. Yeah, it's easy to tell me how you won. Now tell me how you're going to win.
Get the best start.
Okay. And increase your lead, right? Well, it was an interesting comment, you know, of getting a good start and then tacking to cross the fleet, kind of consolidating and staying between them and the windward mark, you know, anticipating kind of any shift. So, do you think it's going to continue shifting back and forth or stay steady?
I think so. In fact, it's come back a little bit left watching the Mariners here.
Okay.
Normally our thermal's about 210.
Did you get out early before the start?
We got a little bit of look at the wind, but we kept thinking it's going to keep going over here and it hasn't gone there yet.
Okay. Did you get any data before the start that made you know what was going to happen?
We had a good idea of the line, you know, what the heading of the line was when it was square, and that the lower end was favored. In fact, you couldn't cross the starboard starting line on starboard tack.
Very good. Thanks. We've had 30 minutes plus between races, and this is a wonderful time to try to get a competitor to do a little boat speed drill and just use the time wisely. You can with the competitor or with the buddy, you can sail side by side on one tack or the other upwind, playing with adjustments, playing with tiller technique, with crew weight distribution, just a lot of different variables to try to perfect your boat speed and try to figure out the conditions for the day. Of course, it's very necessary if you have a boat speed problem, and there's always that ultimate goal of going faster and faster and faster. So using this time to work with someone else is the only way to really know how to increase your boat speed. You never know if you're going faster unless you actually
This will be a lightning start, 4 legs. This will be a lightning start, 4 legs.
Being new to this area, that doesn't mean a lot to me. 3 whistles, I assume, is 3 minutes. 4-leg course, I assume, is triangle windward. But as you can tell from the last video, I'm just guessing. While you're watching upwind, trying to figure out which side of the course is going to have the most breeze and where the breeze is going to come from in about 3 or 5 minutes for the start, you also want to, of course, be watching the flag here and deciding which end of the line is favored. Okay, so as you're studying the breeze, and the crew should be watching this too, because many times the skipper has to take his attention off of the windward leg, and before the start there may be an obvious breeze coming in favoring one side of the course, or more importantly one side of the committee boat. Last month on a similar day in Nyack, at 3 minutes the skipper or crew noticed an obvious wind shift which heavily favored the port end, and so he went from a starboard tack favored committee boat where most of the fleet was to a port tack start, and won the race. Okay, that signal flag's down, and looking over the orange flag staff to the orange ball, we're going to line up something on the shore. Looks like a white building. This lightning's going to be in our way. But as we look down that line, yeah, there's a white building right on the other side of the committee boat along that orange ball. And that gives you a line of reference on the shore of where that imaginary starting line is. So once you're on the starting line, you can see that orange ball and the white buildings to the right of the orange ball. That means we're above the line. Of course, that's obvious from because we can see the committee boat. But once you're in the middle of the starting line, it's less obvious because you're looking from side to side rather than down the line. Okay, watching these flags, I like to look at the race committee flags rather than my own sails. When you go head to wind, you're kind of out of control, and if it's a really big, busy starting line, I like to always be either on port or starboard, and I've gotten where I can look at those committee boat flags and kind of tell which end of the line is favored. If I'm at the other end, I may be forced to shoot head into the wind. But looking at these flags, it looks like it's harder to tell from this angle, but it looks like the port end of the line is favored, or the ball. Here's another shot down on the shoreline. See if we don't have that white building anymore, but that's basically what you're looking at right over on the shore. The wind has shifted a little bit, and it's fairly square to almost committee boat now. And that boat in the way, we still don't have a good sight.
Like that.
Okay, now that the blue flag's down, we have less than a minute. In less than a minute, you want to make sure that so in the last minute you want to position your boat so that when you get to the starting line, the time is run out and you're at full speed. At this short of a line, it doesn't really matter where you are as much as how much speed you have, because a lot of boats position, jockey around, and they get to the starting line with less than maximum speed. So in 30 seconds, they may have a much better start than the other boats around them, just because they're trying to build their speed, and you've already got your speed and are actually making a lead out of that, or making a good start. Let's see if we can tell if anybody has any more speed than the other. They all seem to have hit the line with maximum speed. Looking upwind, you can see that there's a good puff right over here. I think I'm looking at the windward mark right now, so
Mariners will have a 10-minute lead flag.
not any big reason to tack. It is kind of shiny over here. The fleet's in a lull, but I think they're sailing through the lull to this puff. And it looks like the puff's filling to windward, so these boats to leeward are probably hating life right now. Having started near the committee boat, there you can see the puff hitting the blue boat. I assume that's a puff. Let's see if it shows on the white boat. That could have been crew just going to leeward. The blue boat would get the puff first, because you can see the puff right here. Now the crew on the white boats, as they see that puff filling, they should anticipate that, keeping the boat flat. Here we have a skipper tacking over, trying to get to this puff sooner. They've decided the puff isn't going to come to them as quickly as if they just tack over and go for the puff. Now it's filling good port tack. major shift. Now the port tack's favored. Just missed us. The blue boat jib backwinded, showing that they have a big wind shift. They've sailed into this puff, which is backwinded their jib, which is a header, so they're tacking on the header, which means now we have a starboard tack lift, and you can see they look a lot better on these white boats now. Staying in phase with the shift is just paramount. And I'm sure that's a little bit unusual, because I imagine this place has a fairly steady sea breeze most of the time. This is almost like lake sailing with these dramatic wind shifts. I like the skipper up here on the high side. Let's keep an eye on his tiller and just see if he's using his brake very much. He's got a good view of the jib from up there. The crew is on the low side, keeping the boat heeled. And some people might say that's a little excessive heel. If you heel too much, it induces drag in your rudder and centerboard and hull shape even. Looking at his top batten, looks maybe tight. Just depends on how his boat speed compares to the other boats. Doesn't matter what the coach says. If your boat speed's comparable or faster, then that's the way you want to go. So your crew down on the low side is constantly evaluating your boat speed and your point, and relating that to you steering. That may change your technique of steering. You may decide you have too much heel, you may decide you have too much twist, not enough twist. Just depends on what you want. If you see that they're flat, then that's something you ought to consider, flattening your boat. There comes a time where you decide that you know more than your competition, but until that time you always want to consider what they're doing and why you're doing something differently. So you're looking at their heel, their crew placement, their twists. As a kid, I had a really great sailor that was 2 years older than me, and I was able to concentrate on boat speed by just following him and letting him make all the decisions of tactics. So I just concentrated on boat speed. The more I concentrated on boat speed, the closer I got to finish with him. After I could match his boat speed, then I began second-guessing some of his decisions and tactics. Looking up ahead, you can see one boat with a lot of twists, and as a result, he's footing. The boat with very little twist, now that's on the right, has more point. So basically, the tighter the sheet, the more you're going to point. But also, remember earlier we were saying that with those tight sheets, you have a very narrow margin of error to steer to. So you can't always get point just because you bring in your sheets. In fact, as a general rule, you want to start off with your sheets fairly loose, like you would coming out of attack. With the loose sheets, you have a wide margin of error and a lot of acceleration, and it's easy to keep your boat at maximum boat speed. As your crew says, hey, we've got plenty of speed, but not enough point. With that data, you can say, okay, well, let's go for a little bit more point now that we have boat speed, and you start bringing in your sheets a little bit at a time. As you bring your sheets in a little bit at a time, you get more and more point, hopefully. If that kills your boat speed, then you probably brought them in too much, and for other variables that you haven't identified, you probably ought to keep your sheets out and keep going for that boat speed and figure out your point after the race. It's clear that I really don't use races as a way of learning how to sail or how to make your boat go fast. Races really are more of the chess game, and practices or boat speed drills is where you really learn how to make a boat go fast. If you're a golfer, you don't go to the golf course and learn how to swing. You go to the driving range, work on your swing. And that's what you do with your boat speed drills. Before the race, on a separate day, you go out with your buddy and you just start pulling strings and seeing what's fast. Write that data down and bring it out on another day. Okay, this boat definitely, he's tacked over here to this next puff, which was a good move. You can see some of the shiny water over here. So if the wind shifts to the right like it does many times, he'll have a little bit of leverage over on the right side. Some of the boats definitely stayed over here on the left a little bit too long. Basically, you wanted some crew looking around all the time, looking for the shiny water and keeping you out of it. You can see these boats up here tacking. Before that, it looked like they were getting a lift, but I guess I was anticipating, just seeing their heading as they began tacking. But as you watch those guys, you can anticipate what kind of wind they have by how many crew are on the rail, how much the boat's heeled, and just trying to figure out what kind of velocity do they have. What kind of velocity would I anticipate? So if we were a crew member looking at this boat right now, you can see that we're gaining on that boat because we're seeing new trees on his jib. You can see the boat behind him disappearing, and he'll reappear in front of the jib. And oops, there we go. And that means basically that we're gaining on him. That we're footing, okay? So I would tell the skipper we're footing right now. Our angle is about the same, so you could just say, points neutral, or if we thought we were getting closer to him, we could say we're pointing a little bit on him, that kind of thing. Let's pan over and look at some of the other boats. Okay, now you can see that the shoreline is disappearing, so he's gaining trees, or we're losing trees, or something like that. That tells the skipper that we're not footing as well, but we may be pointing. You see how we're getting closer to these boats, so we're pointing on him, but not footing. That gives him an idea of how he may want to steer. Okay, crew, that boat needs to be a lot flatter. The skipper brought it up into the puff and actually left the sail trying to keep the boat flat. So this crew needs to go to the high side, keep the boat a little bit flatter, anticipating those puffs. That much heel, you almost drag your rudder through the water. Also, the crew should be announcing to him that we're crossing another boat on starboard, but I think looks like we have them. Okay, they've decided to tack, and which is probably a good idea, staying between that boat and the windward mark. If they went any further, they'd be near the ley line. May want to go. They maybe should have gone a little bit closer to that competition, just in case if they did get lifted and didn't lay the mark, they would lose that guy. But it does look like there's more velocity over here on the left side. The water's a little darker. Now, instead of following this blue boat over to the left side of the course, this guy's decided to tack over, split tacks. And that's kind of risky because you can see the water shinier over here. And he's also getting close to his ley line, so no matter what he gets out here, it'll put him on the ley line. If it's a lift, he'll be above the ley line, overstanding. If it's a header, then he's sailing the wrong tack right now, okay? So that's a header means, he's going to still have to tack on the port, which means he's on a bad port right now. So that's a no-win situation going to the right now. Sorry about that. And here's the blue boat. You can see in that short distance this guy has lost him tremendously. So skipper, get your crew to just start describing what they see. It's impossible to do it all, so you've got to rely and just divide up the responsibilities and ask your crew to take over some of those things, and then let them make a few mistakes. If they lose a few boat links like that, at least they're taking a video of the whole thing and studying it compared to your snapshots, and you can concentrate on boat speed and the driving that is required to keep a boat going fast. A couple of sets, you can see a lot of these spinnakers are having major twists. I assume that this is the first set, and that blue spinnaker should have been packed. And basically packing, all that means is running your green tape. If you go from your clew and run the green tape all the way up to the head, you can untwist the head real easily. If you run from the head down to the clew, you've got to unhook the snaps, flip the whole thing around a couple of times, and it's a lot more work. So you always want to run from your guy clew all the way up to the head and take any twists out of the head. Just like that spinnaker had to do for itself. It untwisted at the head of the sail. Now on the dowse, you want to basically, well, we'll talk about that when we get down there. Maybe I can describe it before it actually happens. Let's see if anyone does. I have kind of an unusual takedown procedure, which is almost like packing the spinnaker, so it may avoid this kind of twist when you hoist it. Okay, we have 3 boats on a fetch to the reach mark, to the jibe mark. So this main concern now is how to keep clear air and how to keep his boat speed up so that he doesn't lose any of this lead. That could be the first or the second boats. The third boat is basically, you know, in the offensive position. So he's trying to slow the 2 boats down. He can do that by having them sail further than him. Okay, how do you get them to sail further? Well, when they're looking, you head up, which scares them that you're going to head up and take their wind, so they head up even further. When they head up, you head down, which means you really haven't headed up much at all. By the time they see that you're not going to head up, they've already gone up several boat lengths. They come back down to match your course, and they've given away a little bit of lead. Every time they head up further than you, they've given up a little bit more of their lead. They're very protective of that windward quarter because they know if you get across the wind, you can suffocate their air and pass them. So you want to just sail right down on their transom, never giving them an indication that you're not going to pass them to windward. Hopefully that'll get you in passing position for this jibe mark. You can see all 3 boats are kind of high at the jibe mark. The leader's going to have to head down, square his pole, expose even more of his air to the second place boat. That gives the third place boat even more opportunity to take the wind of the second and first place boats. Hopefully reducing quite a bit of this lead so that at the jibe mark it's a nip and tuck reach to the next mark. Okay. Now if this is a fairly close reach, what would you guess that the next reach is going to be? All the answers in? Okay, if this is close, if it's a typical triangle, means the next jibe will be a freer, more downwind reach. That means that it's going to be even harder to protect your air behind you. So you probably want to jibe at this mark, heading up a little bit, protecting any air behind you as the boats jibe behind you. Now in doing so, you're giving away part of your lead just to protect your air. And once again, you're sacrificing part of your lead to protect your clear air. Okay, here comes the jibe. You can see how it's collapsing on the inside. That was from not over rotating your spinnaker. You want to get that spinnaker as much as possible on the right hand side of the boat, and then when you get your pole on, then you just trim it in and bring your pole back again. So that gives you a free rotation. Beautiful job. Now when that pole is slammed, if your guy needs to come back, then you jerk it back really hard with your sheet hard, and it's basically a free pump. Okay? I didn't say that. But you can see the advantage of over-rotating your spinnaker and keeping it full the whole time. Very few crew rotate the spinnaker enough in their jibe, and as a result they lose a lot of air from their pole being too far back. But of course there's no pole on there, so that's why you're compensating, having your spinnaker as far around on the right hand side as you can. Okay, now that these boats are heading for their mark, let's compare. Well, your coach isn't right. It's maybe a little bit freer. I don't know. What do y'all think? Is it the same reach as it was before? You can tell better than I since you were on the boat on both reaches. This looks fairly close, looking at the masthead. Still a little forward of the beam, it looks like. But all 3 boats are sailing high of the mark, so you can see they're very worried about losing air behind them. So third boat, as you continue following these guys up, what goes up must come down, and as they come down, they're exposing their wind to you. So just keep following up. It's a great position right on their quarter. You're forcing them to sail higher than you are, and as a result they're sailing a longer leg than you are. So when you get to this jibe, if you get to this mark up here, you may not have passed them, but you're right on their transom and ready to pass them upwind on the next tack. At this point, no one's depowering. You even have some crew on the low side, so you want your main as powerful as possible. That means no Cunningham on, eased outhauls, boom bang down so that the boom is parallel. Maybe all your telltales on your main flowing evenly. You know, your leech telltales. You want your spinnaker pole horizontal. Sometimes people like to actually raise their pole, sky their pole a little bit. They say that opens the leach on your spinnaker and your main, keeps from backwinding your main quite as much by skying the pole. You definitely don't want to have your pole down, you know, like I was recommending on the run, because that makes it a little bit harder to fly. You can see the third boat now is cutting the corner. Boats 1 and 2 are still fighting, and they're going to sacrifice quite a bit of their lead. Now consider this also, one of your crew is also looking behind or upwind and helping the skipper sail up on the lull and down in the puffs. So if you see some dark water coming towards you, then in relation to that dark water, you'd be in a lull. So you'd want to tell your skipper, you know, puff in 60 seconds or puff in 5 minutes, which means you're in a lull. Now 5 minutes away means you may not ever see that puff, so I wouldn't necessarily come up. But if you see that a puff's definitely coming towards you, that means you're in a lull, which means you probably ought to head up a little bit. When the puff hits, you can head back down. All of that to keep your boat speed up to maximum. There's our mark, and you can see we're getting close enough now to start talking with the crew about what kind of douse it's going to be. The crew needs to anticipate what the next set's going to be. Whichever one, it's going to be a run, or actually this is a finish, so it doesn't really matter what our next set's going to be, does it, team? So this means you want to have a pretty aggressive rounding if this is the finish. Positions here may dictate which side of the course you can dominate. With the new rules, if you do make an overlap from clear astern, then you don't have the boat that establishes the overlap doesn't have leffing rights. I'm getting battery warnings, so I'm going to go ahead and shoot as much as I can. I think you'll know where you finish, but this is great for the crew to see their rounding. You know, a picture is worth 1,000 words, so let's just let it speak for itself. That's as silent as I can be. You can see how the boats are rounding wide, cutting the other side of the mark close. Those are beautiful roundings, very tactical. They're not allowing any boat to get even a breadth of bow inside them. You can see this guy's tacking right away, very good rounding. Using your crew weight to make that rounding would have been even more powerful. You know, your crew's really steering the boat with their weight. So give them credit for that, and ask them, you know, what, you know, to coordinate with you to make that turn. That was a very difficult turn, 180-degree turn, and the less you use your brake, the better. Now go with your plan. You've tacked away, look at your compass heading, looking upwind, crew, decide which side of the course has less shiny water. Okay, they've decided to go with their competition. They've cleared their air. Hopefully this is getting them back into the game plan. Jib eased for acceleration. Crew down low for a little bit of heel out of the tack. Once you're back up to speed, you can start clicking them in tighter and tighter until the skipper's happy as plum. Alright, indication that the boats up here are getting a little puff on starboard. Mainly because of their heel. I can't tell on the water surface if they're getting, you know, much more. Good tactical race. So skippers, you've got to concentrate on making the boat go fast, pass off the tactics to your crew, at least to having them describe what's happening, you know. The other two boats are on starboard. We're the only one on port right now. You know, our compass is, you know, 20-50. 20 right now, 50 is the best we've seen. Something like that. 20-50 means 20 right now means we're 30 high of the best we've ever seen on port. That gives you pure data to make a decision of, hey, I like this port, we're going to stay, even though the fleet is going over here on starboard. Of course, here looking at the shiny water, it looks a little bit scary over here compared to your competition over here. I don't know, maybe they don't have any. It does look a little bit darker. Battery's going any moment now. Okay, we decided to stay with them, and sometimes the safest call is the best call. I see jibs going up. We've got a good race. You know, it doesn't mean that you're really in last, because there's a great race going on right here. So, you know, not everybody gets to win, and you just want to have the best crew work and the best coordination and teamwork as you can. free flying, bringing the spinnakers into windward. See how they're gathering the foot, now bringing the halyard down? That's how you induce twists. Halyard down first, leave this foot stretched across the bow. It's kind of a reverse set. As soon as you get your hand on the spinnaker, you bring it down, leaving the foot over the bow, and then you bring your foot in. And it's just no way it can twist that way, so it's packed. Nice wide rounding and then close on this side. But you see how hard, brake on, heavy braking action there. Okay, you can see the acceleration this other boat got out of that rounding. So just coming out, you don't even need your regular crew, just coming out and doing, windward leeward roundings without a spinnaker. It's really good and fun for the skipper to just get a feel for the boat and how to make it tack without losing speed. Good tight. That's a loose cover. He's allowed the blue boat to have some clear air. So basically, he agrees with going left, and he's going to follow the blue boat left. If he tacked on the blue boat's air, he's almost forcing the blue boat to tack and forcing him out to the other side of the course. You do that, you can't cover your competition. So this way, he gets to go left with this competition and keep a nice eye on him. And hopefully, if he's confident of his boat speed, okay, here comes the blue boat wants to split. It's a good call. We got a nice little tacking duel going on. Okay, now the white boat's tacked on the blue boat's air, which is going to force the blue boat back over to the other side where he wants him to go. There should be reason to each time you tack and where you tack. It should be predictable, not irrational. This is very predictable if you want this guy to go to the left side. Okay, the blue boat's tacking over, give him clear air and go with him. That way, white boat, you're following the leaders and staying with the rest of the fleet. Okay, now if you tack on his air, you're basically forcing him to continue tacking and staying in a tacking duel. Whatever your rationale is. If you feel like you've got to drive him even further back, then that's what you want to do. If you feel like you're making on the tacks, then you want to continue taking his hair and forcing him into more and more tacks, forcing him further and further back. If you feel like he's gaining on the tacks, then you want to do a looser cover, giving him clear air, hoping he'll stay on the tacks longer and not go into more and more tacking duel where one of you could lose. Okay, all the time scanning upwind, looking for the first indication that you see a puff and one side of the course being favored. There's your windward mark. You can look at the other boats and tell whether they have velocity. You can see this boat's heeling over. You can see the angle he has on his competition. If the mariners are reliable. Hopefully you know that your lightnings are reliable and you can see what kind of breeze they have. They've definitely favored the left side. So that means that we're the only ones on the right side, which tells you something. Okay, now we're still following everybody to the left side. With the little boat speed drill, you'll begin to notice the wrinkles in the main. A lot of times we want to match the wrinkles in the jib. This jib's halyard is a lot tighter than the main's halyard. That's why you see wrinkles in the main and not in the jib. What that means is you've actually pulled the draft forward in your jib, and you have a nice full draft aft. The draft in your main is probably fairly far aft. Looking up the boom, looking at the top batten, you can see that this top batten is almost parallel with the boom. So that's basically a neutral position. When you come out of attack, you want that top batten probably eased off to leeward, meaning that your main sheet's eased for acceleration, and your jib to match. And then as you get up to speed, you click them in so that they're parallel. If you still need some more point and you can maintain that narrow margin of error, then you'll click them in to where they actually kick to windward. You'd never get away with that unless it's very forgiving breeze, good steady breeze, flat water, and a good helmsman. It's a very narrow margin of error to steer to, having those top batten kick to windward. But on a nice day, you can get away with it. You can see this puff come in and the boat heeling. That's more heel than most boats on the course, and so you'll see by watching other boats, we're doing something different.